Hello, thanks for joining us. We are a minute late. We had some technical difficulties, but we are here. Thanks for joining us for our virtual holiday open house program. If you are familiar with this program, this is a program that Tuscaloosa Public Library does every year. It's typically a big event. People come to our building. We have snacks, we have crafts, we have games. But with everything going on in the world right now, that is proving to be a bit difficult. So thanks to the lovely folks of the Tuscaloosa Writers and Illustrators Guild and also the Rude Mechanicals, we're putting together a virtual program for you. So this is what we have today. We'll have a few performances by these great actors and writers. Then we will have a craft courtesy of our children's department. Earlier this week, you had the opportunity to pick up a take-home craft bag. So if you have one of those craft bags, you can watch the video. If you don't have a craft bag, you can use that time to refill on your hot chocolate or go grab a drink and then return to us again. Then after that, we have 5 more performers. And then lastly, we'll have the giveaway. The Tuscaloosa Writers and Illustrators Guild has donated autographed copies of their work. So if you're interested, you could click that link in the comments. There's still time to sign up for one of those books. And after that, I'll pull names for the giveaway. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into the performances. First, I'll be bringing on James Matthew Byers. How's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Great to see you, Ryan.
Nice to see you again. So what will you be performing today?
Okay, today I am performing an original poem called The Ghost of Christmas Hope. My 7th grade students at Bush Hill STEAM Academy and I are reading A Christmas Carol, and they have done such a great job. They inspired me to write this poem. So I'm dedicating this read to my students at Bush Hill STEAM Academy, where I teach at in Birmingham City School System.
All right, well, we're excited to hear it. I'll go ahead and let you get started.
Hey. The Ghost of Christmas Hope. The bells a jangle jingling round, the fireplace hung with care, and I my nightcap tugged and bound, engaged the words, beware. The children sleeping nestled in, with sugar plums and psalm, and yet I felt a hidden grin as sweat formed in each palm. Commercial items boxed and wrapped, the mistletoe aglow, but then I heard a carol tapped from somewhere down below. Upon the windowsill's command, I rushed with curtains flung, to find no soul upon the land, as outward my head hung. Who's there? I called in fearful tone, awaiting something back, but not a sound. I was alone, just stars and skies of black. I whizzed around and lost my breath, for there he stood afloat. I quizzed him, asking, "Are you deaf?" His smile returned to gloat. "I pray you, sir, what are you here that haunts me on this night? On Christmas Eve, removing cheer, replacing it with fright? An answer, sir, for up the stairs my children sleep and dream, and I am sorting their affairs. I pray, don't make me scream." A glowing face as pale as snow, with eyes as holly beads, began to spin a ghastly show, exposing want from needs. I am the ghost of Christmas hope, of mortal centrifuge, the friend of Santa seen in scope, as Ebenezer Scrooge. I come to those who fail to see what Christmas is about, the magic of one's family to clean and clear the clout. The gifts you give are joyous bound, but greater things above are meant on Christmas to be found, the greatest being love. Afar I watched through space and time until the day arrived, and now I'm here to offer grace to see that you survived the traumas of the long ago and reconnect to these, the children that you wish to show your love and aim to please. Allow yourself a chance to be, a chance to seek and find. No presents top your time, you see. My friend, you have been blind. I know the years and months and weeks have ebbed your waning flame, the loss of she whom no one speaks, the whispered, cherished name, is much a ghost as he before, but he is me, of course. Embrace her fully evermore, and do without remorse. Allow for Santa to come by, his sleigh is coming near, and let your gift be love's reply. Away now, in good cheer. I could not move, but blinked my eyes, for Scrooge's ghost was gone, and sobbing in my silent cries, again I was alone. The sound of reindeer on the roof convinced me to take leave. I moved my presence in the proof my children would receive, a magic day like never seen. My heart and love born full went off to bed with joy to glean amid the Christmas pool. The ghost of Christmas hope had called. Yes, Ebenezer Scrooge had come and taken life once stalled from in its subterfuge. A laughing noise and shaking beat, and with the silent creep, as out above they made retreat, the sleigh off in my sleep. With Santa gone, the lights were dim and covers warmed my soul. I drifted pondering the whim of Scrooge's lofty goal. I closed my eyes and dreamt of her, my love, a mother gone. But thanks to Scrooge, it did occur. I never was alone. A Christmas felt, a Christmas kept, a Christmas full in scope. The dawn would greet me ere I slept, renewed in love and hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Thanks for performing today.
I appreciate you so much. Have a happy holidays and Merry Christmas.
Hello.
Happy holidays.
Hello.
So that was Jane Matthew Spires, the Dark Bar, performing The Ghost of Christmas Hope. Up next, we have Jim Ezel. Jim, how's it going?
It's going great, Ron. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. So what will you be performing today?
I'm going to read a personal memoir that I wrote about Christmases from long ago when my brother and I were very young, and we would always go to our grandmother's house we'd meet up with some of our cousins up there, and I had some eccentric relatives. So I'm going to read about them and mention a few of their eccentricities. This is from the 1950s. That's a long time ago. That's in the middle of the last century.
All right. Well, ready when you are.
Okay. Christmas at Grandma Cookie's. A passenger train rolled by a grassy vacant lot where 2 dogs frolicked and 7 children waved brightly burning sparklers. "Merry Christmas," yelled the kids as the engineer returned their greetings with several short whistle blasts. Laden with holiday passengers, the Southern Crescent was bound for New Orleans. It was Christmas Day, 1958, at Grandma Cookie's house in York, Alabama. Grandma Cookie, also known as Alma Louise Davis Tillery, was born in Tuscaloosa. At 17, she married Bill, her doughboy sweetheart, and in 1919, they moved to a small Sumter County town that seemed poised to become a thriving city. York was growing around the intersection of 2 railroads and the combined route of 2 of America's first transcontinental highways. Within a few years, the couple built an ice plant, a service station and cafe, and operated a taxi service. Bill organized York's fire department and served as its first fire chief and was elected to the city council. Alma's Cafe became a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week business that served train crews on the Southern and AT&N railroads and travelers on busy U.S. routes 11 and 80, the future Interstates 20 and 59. In the years before the creation of the Alabama Power Company, the ice plant's giant diesel generator provided electricity to many homes and businesses, including the local movie theater. One night in the early 20s, the power stopped, and in the dark, the theater manager announced, "I'm sorry, there'll be no movie tonight since Mr. Tillery's tailpipe exploded at the ice plant." 3 children were born, and the young family prospered all during the Depression. But by the early 40s, electric refrigerators replaced ice boxes, and the ice plant closed. The cafe continued to thrive, but Bill's health deteriorated, and he died in 1943. After the war, 2 of their children married and contributed mightily to the post-war baby boom. Otis Burt, the oldest, married his high school girlfriend. Soon 4 daughters and a son were born. Peggy married a returning sailor, and 2 sons were born in quick succession. Billy, the youngest, remained a bachelor and became a beloved, eccentric uncle who lived with his mother and 2 Llewellyn bird dog setters, Tip and Rock. In the early 50s, Uncle Billy removed the rear seat from his Chevrolet sedan and hauled a pony to a birthday party for one of his nephews. He also supplied fireworks on that Christmas day in 1958. The children discovered that sparklers would burn through the copper screens on Grandma Cookie's front porch with an intense green flame. Within minutes, the screens were punctuated with scores of holes. A few years later, his 4 Tillery nieces were home alone late one night, and they thought there was a prowler in the bushes outside. Panic-stricken, they called Uncle Billy. Grabbing an old sword off the wall, he rushed over and proceeded to yell at and stab all the shrubbery around their house. It was the first time the sword had been used since the Civil War. Since everyone lived close by, Christmas became the big family get-together. After presents and a light breakfast at home, an excited, hungry crowd descended on Grandma Cookie's house. Grandma Cookie's culinary skills were legendary. The adults sat around a table covered with food, while the children were relegated to card tables in the kitchen or on the front porch in nice weather. The family attacked turkey, ham, fried chicken, cornbread dressing, salads, ambrosia, and vegetables. But the most anticipated items were cakes, pies, cookies, and candies. Alma made her fruitcakes in the summer, and every week until Christmas basted them with bourbon. Pecan and apple pies added to the calorie count, especially when topped with Tuscaloosa's then famous pure process ice cream. The divinity was so light it almost floated off the plate, and the date log and fudge were proclaimed the best ever. But the grandchildren favored the cookies so much that from an early age, they called Alma Grandma Cookie. Alma pampered Tip and Rock, the bird dogs, but they were not allowed inside at Christmas. The children felt sorry for them and would sneak out ham and turkey slices. Most days at lunch, Alma dropped by the house with 2 plates of cafe food for the dogs. Tip and Rock had developed a taste for standard Southern vegetables such as turnip greens, black-eyed peas, and butter beans. Dogs are not vegetarians, but Alma seasoned her dishes with lots of fatback pork, and she always added half a can of Alpo to each plate. Once, she didn't feed the dogs promptly, but covered the dishes with plastic wrap and put them in the refrigerator. Most afternoons, this one included, Uncle Otis Burt would drop by and check out the kitchen. That day, he opened the refrigerator and saw the 2 loaded plates. The next day, he exclaimed, "Oh, Mama, that was the best hash I've ever had." Alma's sister, our great Aunt Marie, came down from Tuscaloosa most years. Her shopping list was simple: bath powder for the ladies and Aquavelva aftershave for the gentlemen. My brother and I were only 10 and 11 respectively, but we still received bottles of the foul blue liquid. After Christmas dinner, presents were exchanged, and Grandma Cookie's little living room was awash with discarded wrapping paper and laughter. By mid-afternoon, everyone was drowsy from overeating and beginning to nod off. After an hour or more of long goodbyes, the crowd would disperse for another year. 62 years later, only 5 remain from the 14 that used to gather at my grandmother's home. All are gone from York, but still are bound by memories of those long ago Christmases, the love and warmth of those times, and the memories of my eccentric relatives flood back whenever I hear a train whistle, pet a large white dog, taste a good cookie, smell bad aftershave, or see a child with a sparkler. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you, Jim. And like I said, previously when we did our interview, I'm from the similar area. So yeah, so that really, your story really took me back to Christmases of my past. So thank you for that story.
Sure, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, so up next we have Laurie Fowler. Laurie, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks.
And what will you be performing for us today?
I'll be reading a poem called The Spirit of Christmas. I found it in some books and rewrote it for this year to be a little bit more appropriate for what's going on in our world right now.
All right, so ready when you are.
Okay. The Spirit of Christmas 2020. The spirit of Christmas is in the sparkling trees, aglow with multicolored lights and shiny ornaments. Lighted forms of white angels, green wreaths, and red stockings hung from the streetlights down Main Street. Outdoor yard decorations with inflatable Santas, elves, reindeers, and flashing lights illuminating the house, plus the wooden forms of shepherds, sheep, wise men, camels, Joseph and Mary figures, and Jesus in the manger. The spirit of Christmas is in the peals of the bells ringing with joy to celebrate the coming of a baby. The sounds of carols playing on an iPhone, not sung by a choir. The laughter of children playing games with their masks on. The spirit of Christmas is in the tired faces of irritable grown-ups shopping for the perfect gifts on Amazon. Excited faces of happy children when they spy Santa, even from 6 feet away. The radiant faces of faithful volunteers giving joy to others, even during a pandemic. The spirit of Christmas is in the generosity of ordinary folks who donate their treasure for someone else to eat a hot Christmas meal. The faces of grateful folks who can be sure they will have a warm place to sleep tonight. Donations of coats and hats and scarves and blankets for those living on the street during the coldest of days. The spirit of Christmas is in us all year. Our arms are still reaching out for virtual hugs and handshakes. Our smiles are still radiant when we see our family both near and far via Zoom. Our hearts are still full of joy when we open our presents with smaller family groups than usual. The spirit of Christmas is in the helping hands that are essential to caring for those who are suffering. Smiling eyes that shine brightly over the masks that everyone wears. Hearts that share compassion in a world pandemic. There is nothing, not a pandemic, not masks, not hand sanitizer, not socially distancing, not smaller gatherings, not canceled traditions that can keep us from celebrating the spirit of Christmas this year. Yes, the spirit of Christmas envelops the world even in 2020. For it is the spirit of Christmas that speaks to humankind saying, rejoice, go live a life of Christmas all year round. Happiness and joy to all who celebrate, now and always. Merry Christmas.
Well, Laurie, thank you for that. I think that was a great message that everyone needs to hear right now. Of course, Christmas is going to, and whatever holiday you celebrate is going to look a bit different this year, but the spirit of the holiday is still there. So I think your poem captures that perfectly. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So up next, we have another Ezel, Carolyn Ezel. Carolyn Ezel, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Ron. How are you? Happy holidays to everybody over at the library.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy holidays to you as well. So what will you be performing for us today?
Okay, today I'm going to read a story I've written specifically for this, and It's called White Gravy. It's dedicated to everyone this year. It's a different kind of context, but everyone who can't be with their loved ones this year.
All right. Well, ready when you are. But before I depart, I will say if you have those craft bags at home, get ready because they're coming up next. But Carolyn, you're good to go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ron. This is White Gravy, and it's copyrighted 2020. The morning smelled like dread, greasy, spicy, not a trace of the eggs and bacon Red usually fixed for him. Not the pancakes she and Papa fixed on Saturdays either, sometimes with blueberries, and always with maple syrup. You can eat as many as your belly will hold, Papa always laughed. Papa laughed a lot. That was one of the first things Eli noticed about him. How could a grown man laugh so much? It drew Eli close, confused him. But this morning, it was what he didn't hear. The bubbling and gurgling and hissing, the finality of an electronic beep telling Red and Papa their coffee was ready. Instead, there was an undercurrent, a drone of voices, 3 men's voices, and the staccato laughter of at least 2 women. And every once in a while, Red's and Papa's voices floated by, calm and patient and easy. He ran his arm back and forth across the soft cotton of his sheets. At home, his real home, his sheet was stiff with dirt and had 3 holes in it, the one in the corner and where his knees hit. Cigarette burns. The tear near his toes, well, he wasn't sure how the sheet got torn. And at home, there'd be 4 more elbows and knees in bed with him, jabbing, poking. This bed felt luxurious, empty. Kayla and Thomas, they'd been taken too, but at least they were together, and he would meet them at the playground tomorrow. It wasn't the same, not being with them all the time, no matter how much of a nuisance they were. But Red and Papa were friends with their new mommy and daddy, that's what they called them, and it was agreed from the beginning he'd get to be with them at least once a week, sometimes twice or more. It was a small price to pay not getting jabbed and poked by elbows and knees. He'd seen presents for them stacked high under their Christmas tree this year. He'd seen his brother's smiles, heard his sisters laugh, gotten caught up in the excitement when they showed him the gingerbread house they decorated with their new mommy. Eli's stomach flopped, like the fish he'd caught and thrown up on a bank when he was little and went fishing with his Uncle Lonnie. He was 5 maybe, just a year younger than Thomas now, and he'd gotten a whooping from his uncle for feeling sorry for the fish, for taking out the hook and stooping down and putting it back in the water. "What's the matter with you, boy? Don't you want to eat tonight?" Uncle Lonnie had bellowed. And Eli hadn't eaten that night. In fact, he'd never eaten fish since. There was a tapping at his door. "Eli?" Red's voice called. She had a sweet voice. It reminded him of a musical instrument, maybe a harp or a real pretty flute sound, like the music that played on his Papa's car radio. Classical, Papa called it, soft, calm. "Eli, you awake?" He held his breath. No way did he want to go downstairs. There was too much food, too many presents, too many people. "Eli, everyone's here. The meal's almost ready, and there are plenty of presents under the tree that need your attention." He breathed deep. He wanted to go home, where there was no tree, no presents, no people filling up the house. Another knock on the door, a little harder. "Eli?" "I'm up," he said, forcing himself to sit. "But I don't feel so good. Maybe I should stay in bed today." Silence, but only for a minute. "May I come in?" How could he say no? She was so nice. She made him feel better. "Okay, but I might get you sick." The door cracked slightly, then opened enough to allow her in. She was a large woman, as tall as the basketball players in his middle school. Her henna-dyed hair was pulled into a tight bun. It had scared him when he first met her purple red hair, and the way she pulled it up and back made her look strict and too church-like, but nothing was farther from the truth. "You can call me Mama, or you can call me Red like most everybody else in town, or you can make up your own name," she told him back then. He chose Red, but he thought of her as his mama. "What's hurting?" she asked. "My heart, my brain." That's what he wanted to say, but that sounded stupid, lame. "My stomach's sick," he said. She sat on a tiny corner of his bed. He wasn't sure how she perched there without falling. "Is this hard for you?" she asked. "I imagine it might be real hard being away from your birth family on Christmas Day." Her eyes as brown as chocolate, her forehead was wrinkled with concern. How could he explain? "Do you want to call home?" she asked. "Wish your mother a Merry Christmas?" He shook his head. "No, we wished her that when we saw her, when we took her the coat and the food and that quilt you made." The quilt was blue and brown with lots of yellow in it. He helped wrap it, never saying what he was thinking, that his ma didn't take care of things, that the dogs would end up getting it muddy, tearing it up. She's having a good Christmas because of what you and Papa did. What was it Mom had whispered when she hugged his neck before he and Red got back into the car to leave? Words that tore at his heart like sharp scissors through paper. He was used to her words doing that, and he'd never get used to it. Her lips were drawn into one of those smiles of hers, and she'd said that foster care was a good thing after all. Just look at the coat and the bags of food and the other presents it had gotten her. He knew she'd have more food on her table this Christmas than they'd ever had when he lived at home. Probably all of his cousins and uncles and a few aunts were there. It made him mad to think about. Relieved, too. Eli? He breathed deep, realizing Red was waiting for an explanation. There's so many people downstairs, he said. He watched confusion sweep through her eyes. But you know everybody. It's just Bob and Lynn and John and Ellen and Jeff and Myra and Ellie and Mac. Hers and Papa's grown children and their spouses and a couple of teenagers too old to be his friends. It was true. He knew them all, liked them. He didn't know how to say it was too much food, too much tree, too many presents, too much Christmas. I don't have any presents for anyone, he said, not even for you or Papa. He saw her hand reach out, felt her smooth fingers stroke his cheek. Oh, Eli, of course, we forgot to tell you. The grown-ups in our family don't really give each other presents. I mean, not really. Just a few little things. Well, we donate to places like the food bank instead. He swallowed hard. It surprised him. He was going to cry. I wanted to give you and Papa something, he said, but by the time I bought the doll for Kayla and the trucks for Thomas with the money you gave me, I didn't have anything left. He wondered if they'd already opened them, if they liked them, if they'd bring them to the playground tomorrow. She smiled and her head shook just a little, like a real slight breeze was moving it. Eli, our present is that you're here with Papa and me, and that you can live here and we can watch you grow and be a part of your life until you can go home to your mother. He hoped that never happened. I don't ever want to go home, he said. I want to stay here forever. Well, Red said, standing up, your Papa and I and everyone else downstairs love you, and we want whatever turns out best for you. Just don't you ever forget that. Now hurry and get dressed so we can have Christmas. He wasn't ready, not yet. What's for lunch, he asked. She laughed. Turkey and ham, sweet potato casserole and green bean casserole, peas, carrots, green salad rolls, and all kinds of yummy desserts. I'm sure you can find something you like. White gravy, he asked. His Aunt Sue, the one who called DHR on his ma, always had chicken and white gravy on the table for Christmas. Aunt Sue did good. She'd been taken too. She grew up in a foster home, she told him. Finished high school and studied to be a nurse. That's what she was, a nurse. She had a house, a dog named Smithy, a silver Nissan. Red was headed toward his bedroom door. White gravy, she asked. I've had white gravy in restaurants. It's good, but I've never made it. Don't even know how. I've always made brown. He wrinkled his nose, the kind with all those awful tasting pieces of meat in it. Her laughter hopped across the room, bounced off his face, left him smiling. Giblets, she said. Yeah, that's the kind. I didn't like it either when I was your age. Does your mother make white gravy? He wanted to say his ma wouldn't bother to make gravy, to cook a real meal. No, but Aunt Sue does. Sometimes we went to Aunt Sue's for Christmas dinner. She always makes chicken and white gravy. I bet it's good. Maybe you could get dressed real fast and give your aunt a call before you come downstairs. Maybe you'd like to wish her a Merry Christmas. Red reached into her pocket and handed him her phone. But please don't take too long. We're all waiting on you. Eli swung his legs off the bed. He liked his NFL pajamas and his Star Wars sheets and his poster of Grogu beside the big mirror. Okay, he said. We'll call your brother and sister this evening if you'd like. And then his door closed and she was gone. Eli stared at the phone. His finger punched Aunt Sue's number. 1 ring, 2. Hello? Her voice washed over him like a warm, soft rain. Even though her tone was not like Red's, Aunt Sue's voice was always hard and practical. Merry Christmas, Aunt Sue. He felt his heart snapping out of his body like a tight rubber band, zooming toward her home. He wished he were there with Kayla and Thomas. And Ma, too. Eli, how's it going? You having a good Christmas, baby? I'm still upstairs in my PJs. I'm about to get dressed. Lord, child, it's 10:30. Get your tail dressed and get downstairs. What's wrong with you, lolling around wasting Christmas Day? Why aren't you downstairs helping set the table? She was right. What was wrong with him? He could have been helping. He hadn't even thought about it. There's so many people and so much food and too many presents, and I don't have anything to give Red and Papa. Eli, Leslie, Michael, Hammond, stop all that fussing. Doesn't make a bit of sense. Everything you've just told me is a blessing, except you don't have a present for Nancy and Rick. That's what Aunt Sue called Red and Papa. They make giblet gravy, he said. I wish I was with you and that I had some of your white gravy and chicken. What? And then you'd be going home tonight with your ma and all her issues? That's what Aunt Sue always said about his ma, that she had issues. Eli thought it was a kind way to describe it. No, ma'am, I'm glad I'm not at home. It wasn't totally true. He was, and he wasn't. And what are you talking about? If you don't like giblet gravy, eat your turkey plain or with cranberry sauce if they have some on the table. Yes, ma'am, he said. Red says she likes white gravy but doesn't know how to make it. Eli could hear a smile curl around his aunt's lips. Easiest thing in the world to make, she said. I make mine with bacon grease, but you don't have to. Just butter, flour, and milk, salt, and pepper. That's it. You can whip it up about 10 minutes. Easy peasy. An idea skittered into his head. He stared at Baby Yoda. It almost looked like Grogu was smiling back at him. Can you tell me exactly how to make it, he asked. That's what I can give them for Christmas, your recipe. I'll write it down, wrap it up. You can Google it. Please, Aunt Sue, I want yours with the bacon grease exactly like you make it. She paused long enough for Eli to worry she was going to say no. Sure, she said. He stood up, hurried to his desk to grab a pen and paper. How are your brother and sister, she asked. He pulled the chair out, sat. Great. Thomas lost a tooth, one on the top front last week, and Kayla's getting a belly on her. Aunt Sue laughed. Good. At least your ma won't be able to pawn their presents like she did the year the church gave you Christmas. She had to pay the light bill, Eli said. She took mine, too. Your ma has issues, Aunt Sue said, and don't be defending her. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. She laughed. Do you know what I was remembering this morning, Eli? No, ma'am. I was remembering the time I paid for you to go on that field trip with the soccer team to the beach, Gulf Shores. Do you remember that? How could he forget the white sand and the foamy waves that knocked him off his feet and tumbled him like he was in a dryer? Of course, he said. It was the best trip ever. Well, she said, there'll be plenty more because you and your brother and sister are going to do good in life. But do you know what I was remembering? That plastic bottle filled with ocean water you brought home and wrapped up for me. Remember how we all stuck our tongues in it and how salty it was? He laughed, a belly laugh, a wonderful Christmas laugh. Yeah, he said, I remember. He could almost taste the ocean again, warm, salty enough to burn his tongue. He smiled. I love you, Aunt Sue. I love you too, baby. I wish I was with you, with real family. All families real, Eli. You're young yet, but you'll see. Families change. Sometimes they get smaller, sometimes they grow. And when they grow with nice folks, that's a real blessing. Now, you ready to write this down? She asked. Yes, ma'am. And he was ready to write it down, to wrap it in a page from one of his comic books, to hurry and get dressed and go downstairs and eat a big lunch and find out what was in all of those packages. He was ready to spend Christmas with Red and Papa and their people, his people, all of them. Thank you. Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Well, Carolyn, thank you for that story. Also, thank you for capitalizing on the Grogu hysteria to make us all really relate to that story. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ron.
All right, so that was Carolyn Ezell performing White Gravy. And up next, this is where we'll take a bit of an intermission. So if you have those craft bags, get them ready. Miss Haley of our youth department will show you how to make your ornament. If you don't have a craft bag, like I said, you can use this opportunity to step away, refill your drink, do whatever you have to do. But we'll be right back after this video.
Hey everybody, and happy holidays! My name is Haley Bryant, and I like to spend my holidays, with my close family and crafting and staying warm. Well, today we can do all those things while we make our very own macaroni Christmas trees. Look how cute these are! Look, they're a little messy, so heads up parents, but they're a whole lot of fun, and these are going to look super great on your Christmas trees. So just a forewarning, don't eat any of the fun little macaronis because you need all of them to make your tree extra cute. Okay, are you ready? Let's get started.
All right, so I know it's only a week before Christmas and you thought your Christmas tree was complete, but it isn't until you add that ornament to the tree. So special thanks to Ms. Haley of the Children's Department and also the rest of the Children's Department for getting that craft prepared for everyone out there. I think there may still be some bags left. I'll have to double check on that. Don't quote me on that. But if you have that craft bag, feel free to make that ornament and place it on your tree. But now we'll get back to the performances. So up next, we have Exa Skinner. I'll bring her to the screen now. And Exa, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. So what will you be performing today?
I'm going to read a story called Papa Pavlov it was translated by Leo Tolstoy. And it's actually originally a French story, and it's based on biblical story. Sorry, that's my daughter, Asa. She woke up just in time.
All right. Well, you and your special guest, I hope you're ready because it's your time, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay. So, Papa Pavlov's Special Christmas. It was Christmas Eve, and although it was still afternoon, lights had begun to appear in the shops and the houses of the little Russian village, for the short winter day was nearly over. Excited children scurried indoors, and now only muffled sounds of chatter and laughter escaped from those shutters. Old Papa Panov, the village shoemaker, stepped outside his shop to take one last look around. The sounds of happiness, the bright lights, and the faint but delicious smells of Christmas cooking reminded him of past Christmas times when his wife had still been alive and his own children were little. Now they had all gone. His usually cheerful face, with the little laughter wrinkles behind the round steel spectacles, looked sad now. But he went back indoors with a firm step, put up the shutters, and set a pot of coffee to heat on the charcoal stove. Then, with a sigh, he settled in his big armchair. Papa Panov did not often read, but tonight he pulled down the big old family Bible, and slowly tracing the lines with one forefinger, he read the Christmas story. He read how Mary and Joseph, tired by their journey to Bethlehem, found no room at the inn, so that Mary's little baby was born in the cowshed. Oh dear, exclaimed Papa Panov. If only they had come here. I would have given them my bed, and I could have covered the baby with my patchwork quilt to keep him warm. He read on about the wise men who had come to see the baby Jesus, bringing him splendid gifts. Papa Panov's face fell. I have no gift that I could give him, he thought sadly. Then his face brightened. He put down the little Bible, got up, and stretched his long arms to the shelf high up in his little room. He took down a small, dusty box and opened it. Inside was a perfect pair of tiny leather shoes. Papa Panov smiled with satisfaction. Yes, they were as good as he had remembered, the best shoes he'd ever made. I should give him those, he decided. As gently, he put them away and sat down again. He was feeling tired now, and the further he read, the sleepier he became. The print began to dance before his eyes so that he closed them just for a minute, and in no time at all, Papa Panov was fast asleep. And as he slept, he dreamed. He dreamed that someone was in his room, and he knew at once, as one does in dreams, who the person was. It was Jesus. You have been wishing that you could see me, Papa Panov, he said kindly. Then look for me tomorrow. It will be Christmas Day, and I will visit you. But look carefully, for I shall not tell you who I am. When at last Papa Panov awoke, the bells were ringing out, and a thin light was filtering through the shutters. Bless my soul, said Papa Panov. It's Christmas Day. He stood up and stretched himself out, for he was rather stiff. Then his face filled with happiness as he remembered his dream. This would be a very special Christmas after all, for Jesus was coming to visit him. How would he look? Would he be a little baby, as he was at that first Christmas? Would he be a grown man, a carpenter, or the great king that he is, God's son? He must watch carefully the whole day through so that he recognized him however he came. Papa Panov put on a special pot of coffee for his Christmas breakfast, took down the shutters, and looked out the window. The street was deserted. No one was stirring yet. No one except the road sweeper. He looked as miserable and dirty as ever, as well he might be. Whoever wanted to work on Christmas Day, and in the raw, cold, and bitter freezing mist of such a morning? Papa Panov opened the shop door, letting in a thin stream of cold air. "Come in," he shouted across the street cheerily. "Come in and have some hot coffee and keep out the cold." The sweeper looked up, scarcely able to believe his ears. He was only too glad to put down his broom and come into the warm room. His clothes steamed gently in the heat of the stove, and he clasped both red hands around the comforting warm mug as he drank. Papa Panov watched him with satisfaction, but every now and then his eyes strayed to the window. It would never do to miss his special visitor. "Expecting someone?" the sweeper asked at last. So Papa Panov told him about his dream. "Well, I hope he comes," the sweeper said. "You've given me a bit of Christmas cheer I never expected to have. I'd say you deserve to have your dream come true." And he actually smiled. When he had gone, Papa Panov put on the cabbage soup for his dinner. He went to the door again, scanning the street, but he saw no one. But he was mistaken, for someone was coming. The girl walked so slowly and quietly down the street that he could barely see her, hugging the walls of shops and houses. It was a while before he noticed her. She looked very tired, and she was carrying something. As she drew nearer, he could see that it was a baby, wrapped in a thin shawl. There was such a sadness in her face and in the pinched little face of the baby that Papa Panov's heart went out to them. "Won't you come in?" he called, stepping outside to meet them. "You both need a warm seat by the fire and a rest." The young mother let him shepherd her indoors and to the comfort of the armchair. She gave him a big sigh of relief. "I'll warm some milk for the baby," Papa Panov said. "I've had children of my own. I can feed her for you." He took the milk from the stove and carefully fed the baby from a spoon, warming her tiny feet by the stove at the same time. "She needs shoes," the cobbler said. But the girl replied, "I can't afford shoes. I've got no husband to bring home money, and I'm on my way to the next village to get work." A sudden thought flashed through Papa Panov's mind. He remembered the little shoes he had looked at last night, but he had been keeping those for Jesus. He looked again at the cold little feet and made up his mind. "Try these on her," he said, handing the baby and the shoes to the mother. The beautiful little shoes were a perfect fit. The girl smiled happily, and the baby gurgled with pleasure. "You have been so kind to us," the girl said. Then she got up with her baby to go. "May all of your Christmas wishes come true." But Papa Panov was beginning to wonder if his very special Christmas wish would come true. Perhaps he had missed his visitor. He looked anxiously up and down the street. There were plenty of people about, but they were all faces he recognized. There were neighbors going to call on their families. They nodded and smiled and wished him Happy Christmas. Or beggars. And Papa Panov hurried indoors to fetch them hot soup and a generous hunk of bread before hurrying out again in case he missed his important stranger. All too soon, the winter dusk fell. When Papa Panov next went to the door and strained his eyes, he could no longer make out the passers-by. Most were home or indoors anyway. So he slowly walked back into his room, put up the shutters, and sat wearily down in his armchair. So it had just been a dream after all. Jesus was not coming. Then all at once he knew he was no longer alone in the room. This was not a dream, for he was wide awake. At first, he seemed to see before his eyes the long stream of people who had come by him that day. He saw the old road sweeper, the young mother and her baby, the beggars he had fed. As they passed, each whispered, "Didn't you see me, Papa Panov?" "Who are you?" he called out, bewildered. Then another voice answered him. It was the voice from his dream, the voice of Jesus. "I was hungry, and you fed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was cold, and you warmed me. I came to you today in every one of those that you helped and welcomed. Then all was quiet and still, only the sound of the big clock ticking. A great peace and happiness seemed to fill the room, overflowing Papa Panov's heart until he wanted to burst out singing and laughing and dancing with joy. So he did come after all, was all that he said. The end.
Excellent. Thank you. That was great. And I think that perfectly encapsulates the reason for the season. So thank you for that story.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, we have TK Cassidy. And I think everyone is going to enjoy this. If you can see what I'm seeing right now, then you certainly will enjoy this. TK, how's it going?
I'm just fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. So what are you performing for us today?
Well, I had to go through a lot of dusty memories, but I came up with something that actually happened when I was a kid, and I thought you'd enjoy the story. It's called The Great Christmas Pie Making Incident.
All right. Well, I'm ready if you are, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay. All right, thanks. One of my favorite Christmas memories is of the Great Pie Making Incident when I was 11 years old. A few days before Christmas, we were all at the family farm, and a whiteout snowstorm was raging outside. All 7 of my father's siblings had let Grandma know they were coming home for the holiday. With 18 adults and dozens of excited children descending on her home, Gran started cooking right away. Knowing that the task would keep us distracted from the terrible weather and the ovens would keep the house warm, she set about like an army mess cook, putting everything up to the right. Well, being a traditional family, the cooking was the women's work. The men did all the outside work and the women kept the home fires going. Because of the raging storm and the outside chores already being done, the men were in the living room lazing in front of the fire and chatting and listening to the radio and just generally hanging around. I always hated that the boys got to go outside and feed the animals and play in the machine shed with Grandpa and generally help with the fun work, while I, a mere girl, had to stay in the house cooking and cleaning and laundry. I just knew they were having boatloads of fun while I was chained to the house doing hard physical labor. Well, in my narrow estimation, that was true. Now, my mother was the daughter of the town baker, so she was the person assigned to make pies: mincemeat, pumpkin, and apple, 5 of each. I, of course, had to slice up the apples, cut and mash the pumpkins, and feed ingredients into the mincemeat grinder. The kitchen was redolent with the aroma of already baked pies, sage dressing, the ham and turkey in the oven, the wood from the fireplace. There were pots of peeled potatoes and vegetables standing at the ready for cooking. Fresh bread cooled on the counter next to pans of candied yams, waiting for their turn in the oven. By the time my kin rolled in on Christmas morning, dinner would be ready for feasting. Now, during the whole time that we were cooking, I voiced my dismay about the amount of work needed to cook and prep for a meal that would be decimated in a half an hour, leaving another mess for us girls to clean up. Now, Mother and Gran, they just kept me working and ignored my talk. But apparently my father heard me from the other room and pretty soon sauntered right in, followed always by my brothers to see what the problem was. Mother had just smoothed out the last of the 5 bottom crusts for the apple pies and placed them gently in the pie tins. In front of me was a huge yellow glass bowl full of tart Granny Smith apples that I had peeled and sliced up. They were drenched in sugar and cinnamon that I had gotten in there and blended up with my fingers. The best part of that job was licking my fingers on the way to the sink to clean up after mixing. That was my favorite part. But now, one of the jobs, as Mother put the pastry into the pans, I was supposed to ladle heaping spoons of fruit onto the waiting crust, spreading the chunks evenly, and then putting dots of homemade butter onto the fruit. Arms akimbo, Dad stood at the table and watched, and after a few minutes he said, I've heard you grousing all morning. I just don't see what's so hard about all this." Of course, he'd missed the hard part, the preparation. He reached out and grabbed a slice of apple off the pile I had just put in the pan and popped it into his mouth. Of course, each of my brothers reached around and tried to follow suit, but Mother was quick and slapped their hands with her wooden spoon. Squealing, they withdrew empty fingers. "Dad," I scolded, "I had just counted those out perfectly." Mother looked at me, and I winked a little. She smiled and went back to making the top crust. I gently picked up one single apple slice from out of the bowl and delicately placed the morsel right where Dad had stolen his treat. "Seriously," he sniffed, "I just don't see what's so hard about making pies." "Well, that's because we're getting to do the hard part, a part few men can do." I heard Mother snicker softly under her breath. My oldest brother sneered, "Oh, yeah? Men can do anything women can do." My youngest brother went, "Yeah." Well, I sniffed and said, "We've worked too hard on this to make you ruin it. Let you ruin it now." Dad narrows his eyes at me and said, "I accept your challenge. Let me finish this one and we'll see." "Yeah, Dad, you tell her," my brother sounded off. "Yeah." Dad puffed himself up, hiked up his pants, pulled up a chair, and sat down. "Okay," I said, shaking my head. "Here we go." I looked at Mother, who was busily letting my 5-year-old sister help roll out dough. I glanced at Gran, who'd been standing by the stove stirring a fragrant sauce. She looked over his shoulder and winked at me. Knowing that I had inherited my grandfather's trickster gene and how much I would love to get one over on my father, they both hid the big smiles on their faces. I heaved a big sigh. "Okay, you do one, and then if you do well, the boys can try." He reached over for the pie pan I had just filled. "Oh, no, 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 no." I pulled my full pie pan out of his reach and put an empty one in front of him. I'm not going to risk this one. It's almost done." I instructed him to place the apples in a single layer on the bottom of the pan. The rest of us watched with interest as this large man of the land, a truck driver, used his big calloused hands to delicately place each little slice next to each other until the bottom of the pan was covered. Then I pushed over a crock of homemade butter with his tiny jam spoon, and he dipped small dabs and dropped them carefully onto the top of the apples. Then he repeated this process. After several layers, when the apples were nearly heaped in the crust, I told him he was ready for the next step. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Gran remove her pan from the stove and, continuously stirring, bring the pot over close to the table for a better look. Dad studied his work. "Well, now what?" "Now we need to check and see if you've done the job right before we can put the top crust on." I held out my hands, palms up like this, and said, "Now, put your hands like this." I was doing my best not to giggle. Believe me, the struggle was real. The bad angel on one shoulder said, "He's going to make such a funny mess." And the good angel on the other shoulder said, "You should stop him." Nah, this is going to be epic. Now, slide your forefingers under the edge of the pie pan and your thumb on the top and hold it up. He hesitated. I encouraged him with a smile and a nod. "Come on, you have to gently turn the pie tin over upside down. If you have enough butter between the layers, the apples will stay together in the pan and we can put the top crust on. If not, we need to take all the apples out and add a little more butter." Mother coughed softly. "Flour in the air," she muttered. Her shoulders were shaking slightly as she turned away. Gran sneezed, and without saying another thing, she took her cooling sauce back to the stove. I held Dad's glare as deadpan as I could. All of us watched him grab the sides of the pan, lift it up off the table. He looked quizzically at me once more. I nodded gravely, biting the inside of my cheek. The angels on my shoulder were giggling and danced like maniacal munchkins. He took a deep breath and began to turn the pan over towards him. The vision of those apples sliding out of the pan and into his lap was too much for Gran and Mother. Seconds before the apples would have slid out, Mother lost control, which in turn made Graham laugh. I couldn't hold back any longer. The dad and the boys looked at us like we were crazy. That's when the realization of that he was being conned hit him. He froze in midair, pie tin nearly on its side, and yelled, "Wait a minute!" At some point, my grandpa had come to the door of the kitchen to watch what was going on. His booming guffaw joined to the others. Dad's head swiveled, looking at the merry faces around him. I completely lost control. Laughing uproariously, grabbed my sides and toppled over onto the bench that surrounded the table. There he stood with that topless pie tipped almost sideways, my two captivated brothers peering around him to see what would happen next, and awareness rolling across his face like a snowstorm on the prairie. He gently replaced the pie on the table and laughingly threatened to beat me, but we were all guffawing so hard we could hardly breathe at that point. Mother smiled broadly at me. Grandma came over and patted me on the shoulder. Gran whispered, "Well done," when she came back to the table. And that was the last time my dad ever came into the kitchen when the holiday baking was being done.
Yeah, now that I know you a bit better, I knew that there was going to be a bit of mischief in that story, TK.
You should have seen. He'll never forget that, I'll tell you.
Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for that story, TK.
Thanks for having me.
So that was TK Cassidy, and up next we have Patricia Corrielle. Patricia, how's it going?
Fantastic. How are you?
Doing great. So what will you be performing for us today?
I have a Scandinavian folktale, sometimes called the White Bear, sometimes called the Cat of the Dovrefell.
All right. Well, ready when you are.
All right. There was once a man way up in Finnmark who had caught a great white bear, which he was going to take to the king. He traveled and he traveled, leading the great white bear by a rope, until one night he came to a faraway and mountainous place called the Dovrefell. Now, as it happened, the night was Christmas Eve. It was very cold and dark on the Dovrefell, and both the man and the great white bear were very, very tired. Not far off, in a deep valley at the foot of a high mountain, they saw a little cottage with lights burning brightly, so they walked up to it and knocked on the door. When the owner, whose name was Halvor, came to the door, the man said, "Could you give my bear and me a place to sleep tonight?" Halvor said, "If only I could, but my wife and little children and I are just about to leave our cottage ourselves. Every Christmas Eve, a pack of trolls comes down from the mountain and demands to stay in our cottage. They fight and squabble and make so much noise that we are forced to flee ourselves. So you see, we don't have as much as a roof over our own heads for tonight, let alone one to share." "Oh," said the man with the great white bear. "If that's the only problem, you can surely lend us your house tonight. My bear and I are not afraid of trolls, and we are so tired we can sleep through anything." Oh, well, the man pleaded so hard that at last Halvor gave him permission to stay there. Before Halvor and his wife and children left, they set out a fine feast for the trolls. There were ginger cakes and rice pudding and smoked fish and fat sausages and black bread and warm milk and all sorts of good things to eat and drink. There was a blazing fire in the fireplace, too. "If there's no feast ready for them," said Halvor, "the trolls will knock down every wall in the cottage. Oh, they're terrible beings, these trolls." As soon as Halvor and his wife and little children had left, the man went to sleep in the storeroom off the kitchen. The storeroom was quite empty because everything was on the table, waiting for the trolls, so he had no trouble finding room for himself. As for the great white bear, it lay down to sleep under the stove in the kitchen. Soon the trolls came down from the mountain. Some were big and some were small. Some had long tails and some had no tails at all. But all of them had noses as long as pokers, eyes as big as saucers, and long matted hair. They began to fight over the food Halvor and his wife had set out for them. They were very greedy, and not one of them had any manners. They made a lot of noise with their squabbling and screaming and gobbling and slurping too. But the man and the great white bear slept on. That's how tired they were. Suddenly, a little troll caught sight of the great white bear. He said, "Here's a big white cat sleeping under the stove." Then the troll took a fat, sizzling sausage and stuck it on a fork and poked it up against the great white bear's nose, screaming, "Here, kitty, won't you have some sausage?" And when the little troll did this, the great white bear woke up. It was very angry at being awakened, and so it growled and roared and scared the trolls so much that they all, big ones and small ones, those with tails and those without, ran off screaming to the mountain they had come from. Then the great white bear went back to sleep. The next morning, Halvor and his wife and little children came back to their cottage just as the man and the great white bear were leaving. Halvor saw that not much of the feast had been eaten, and that the trolls had not wrecked the cottage much at all. And Halvor thought about this for one whole year. When Christmas Eve came again, he went out into the forest to cut wood for the holidays. While he was hard at work, he heard a voice in the forest calling, "Halvor! Halvor!" Halvor knew it was one of the trolls calling him. "Here I am," he answered. "Have you still got your big white cat that sleeps under the stove?" said the troll. "Yes, indeed I have," said Halvor. "As a matter of fact, she is lying there right now, for she has just had 7 kittens. And I can tell you, each one is bigger and fiercer than she is herself." When he heard this, the troll began to howl and scream and tear his matted hair. He shouted angrily to Halvor, "Oh, if that's true, we can never come to visit you again." Then the little troll ran off to the mountain where he belonged. Never again did the trolls come to spend Christmas Eve in Halvor's little cottage on the Dovrefell, and that made Halvor and his wife and children very happy indeed.
Thank you for sharing that story, Patricia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. So that was Patricia Corrielle. And up next, we have Carolyn Rhodes. Carolyn, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you, and Merry Christmas, and soon to be Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you too. So what will you be performing for us today?
Well, today I'm going to be reading a story from a Christmas book put out by the Saturday Evening Post in the 1970s, but my story goes back much further. I'm going to tell a few people a little bit about what Christmas was like, say, around 200 years ago. So let's start first with John Adams and the First Lady, Abigail Adams. Celebrating Christmas in the White House has been a tradition since 1800. Well, President John Adams and First Lady Abigail Adams were the first to throw a Christmas party in the president's official residence. But it was not as we know it today. There were intimate gatherings with family and close officials, not decorations designed for the media spotlight as we have today. Christmas trees in the White House would not appear until the mid-19th century, when our 14th president, Franklin Pierce, decorated an evergreen on the White House lawn in 1853. Well, along comes Benjamin Harrison. Yes, he was our president, the 23rd president. He stepped up the tradition when he brought a tree inside the White House in 1889, had it lit with candles. It was the largest one ever and the talk of the town. Well, Theodore Roosevelt, however, our 26th president, he had other ideas as far as getting a Christmas tree into the White House. So why was a Christmas tree in a closet? Because President Theodore Roosevelt had decreed there would be no tree in the White House in 1902. Not that Teddy Roosevelt was against Christmas, far from it. The gregarious Teddy Roosevelt, his gracious wife, and his lively brood celebrated the holiday with their customary gusto. There were gifts for all, games and sports, and memorable meals, parties, and dancing. But in 1902, no tree. The president was an ardent conservationist. He was horrified to learn that young pines and spruces had been carelessly cut from some of the national forests for sale as Christmas trees. He feared that would be the increasing demand for Christmas trees that might ravage the woodlands he loved and valued, even though we know he was a hunter. Always one to practice what he preached, however, Teddy Roosevelt announced that the first family would that Christmas do without a tree? Well, we'll see what happens. Happy footnote to the story is that the chief of the U.S. Bureau of Forests and a close friend managed to persuade Teddy Roosevelt that some selective cuttings of young trees could actually benefit for the forests. And before next Christmas rolled around and the ban on the White House trees was lifted, about that same time, the U.S. government began to encourage farmers to plant and harvest Christmas trees as a cash crop. This soon provided an adequate supply for the market, and pressure on the national forests was reduced. Well, of course, people wrote letters during that era, and Teddy Roosevelt writes to his BFF, Master James A. Garfield, who happens to be, yes, the son of President Garfield. Written from the White House, December 26, 1902. Hello, Jimmykins. Yesterday morning at 6:45, all the children were up and dressed and began to hammer at the door of their mother's and my room, in which their 6 stockings, all bulging out with queer angles and rotundities, were hanging from the fireplace. So their mother and I got up, shut the window, lit the fire, taking down the stockings, of course, put on our wrappers, and prepared to admit the children. But first, there was a surprise for me, also for their good mother, for Archie had a little Christmas tree of his own, which, let me turn the page, he rigged up with the help of one of the carpenters in a big closet. And we all had to look at the tree, and each of us got a present off of it. There was also one present each for Jack the dog, Tom Quartz the kitten, and Algonquin the pony, whom our Archie would no more think of neglecting than I would neglect his brothers and sisters. Then all of the children came into our bed, and there they opened their stockings. Can you imagine it? Afterwards, we got dressed and took breakfast, and then all went into the library, where each child had a table set for the bigger presents. Quentin had a perfectly delightful electric railroad, which had been rigged up for him by one of his friends, the White House electrician, who has been very good to all of the children. Then Ted and I, with General Wood and Mr. Bob Ferguson, who was a lieutenant in my regiment, went for a 3-hour ride, and including the children, took lunch at the house with the children's aunt, and went in their lunch at a little table with their cousin Sheffield. Well, late in the afternoon, I played war games of single stick with General Wood and also Mr. Ferguson. I am going to get your father to come on, that's right, that's President Garfield, and try it soon. We have to try to hit as light as possible, but sometimes we hit the sticks hard, and today I have a bump over one eye and a swollen wrist. Then, well, all of our family and kinsfolk, and the Senator and Mrs. Lodge's family and kinfolk, had our Christmas dinner at the White House. And afterwards, we danced in the East Room, closing up with the Virginia Reel. Thank you, and Merry Christmas to all.
Carolyn, thanks for sharing this. That's something I didn't know. Of course, we all know Teddy Roosevelt to be an author, big game hunter, rough rider, but didn't know the story about the Christmas tree and the White House closet. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome, and Happy New Year, and Merry Christmas to all of the librarians and staff at your incredible library. Thanks for having us.
Happy holidays to you as well. All right, so if you're still with us, this is where we revealed the winner of the winners of the book giveaway, courtesy of the Tuscaloosa Writers and Illustrators Guild. Many of the members donated signed copies of their books. They're all wonderful works, and there's something there for everyone. So I would like to thank the members of Twig for donating these books for us. So if your name is called, here's what we'll do. We have your email address. We'll contact you with further information. Once we reopen, you can come select your book at our Reader's Advisory Station. So the Reader's Advisory Desk, you enter the building, is on the opposite side of the history room, and and we'll have someone there so you can select your book. So without further ado, here we go. I'll read out the winners, and we'll also post this on social media just in case you're not watching right now, and we'll also contact you if you're not watching. So here we go. First, Brooke Morrison. So that is Brooke Morrison. Our second winner, Judy McInnes. Judy McInnes. Next, we just have Cam, no last name. So Cam with the K. If this is you, you've won a book. Next, we have Sue Barnes. That is Sue Barnes. Next, we have Amy Sutton. That's Amy Sutton. Next up is Carol Ann Bro. Carol Ann Bro. Apologies if I mispronounced your last name, but I'm sure that's Bro. Carol Ann Bro. So that is our next winner. All right, next up we have Denise Wright. That is Denise Wright. All right, now we have Jamie Butler. That is Jamie Butler. All right, and our last winner, drum roll here, imaginary drum roll. We have Brenda Tucker. That is Brenda Tucker. So, like I said, if you heard your name called today, we'll reach out to you with further details on coming to the library to select your book. So once we reopen, you could just come to the Reader's Advisory Department, pick out your book. And if you see a member of Twig around town or you follow them on social media, just send a thanks for donating these books. Special thanks to Twig. We're very happy to have them in our community and glad that they donated these books for the giveaway. So that concludes our program for today. Once again, we are saddened that we couldn't do our larger program in the capacity that we normally do, but thanks for joining us today for this program. Happy holidays to everyone out there. Stay safe, and until next time, goodbye.